sleeper must awake.
Well, hello everyone. As you can probably hear in my voice right now, oozing out of every syllable I'm uttering, I am the epitome of cool. Yes, folks, I am feeling extremely cool. I feel like a star, kind of. But yeah, no, I'm still it's still me. In fact, if you're watching on YouTube and you see the sunglasses which I'm wearing at night to be extra cool, I'm gonna have to take them off because I can't see shit in them. They're non-prescription. So what was that? What was that very awkward intro? Well, that was me feeling cool. I mean, today's guest is Mitch Horowitz. I mean, this guy has a cool factor that can dwarf anyone's cool factor in the esoterica and spiritual field, like easily. So I got to talk with Mitch, which is something that I've been wanting to do for many years. And as I was saying in the interview with him, it would happen sometimes when I would be listening to him while at work, alone at work, by the way. So I'm not, so just don't you think that I'm extra crazy. And I'd be listening to him, and then he would say something that would spark, my mind to just either disagree or expand on or whatever. So I'd have to pause the whatever interview or lecture and kind of out loud just express how I was feeling about what I just heard and what I was thinking. And so I'm being quite literal when I say that Mitch has been a very thought-provoking person in my life and very influential, to say the least. So yeah, it's hard for me to. By the way, I'm sorry for this really weird intro. It's just really hard for me to summarize how I felt. I just felt really good having this discussion, and that's why I'm extra giggly in this one, because I was just thinking at times, like, oh, that's what I want to do, like, all the time. I want to have those discussions, and especially with someone like Mitch. That was wild, man. That was one of my favorites. So I'm not gonna expand too long. I'm sorry again if it's kind of a messy intro, which Mitch doesn't deserve. He deserves something much better than this. But I'm really moved, and I was kind of on a high. I was kind of high after that interview. Because yeah, I enjoyed it so much. So you know what, I'm just gonna go with Mitch's bio that I just put together, which was pretty hard in itself because Mitch has done so many things, which you can all see on his website in the About section. But if for some reason you don't know Mitch and you're listening to this, because episode 14, people are coming for the guests, not for me. Maybe one day they'll come for me, but not now. So in case you don't know Mitch, here's a quick bio. Mitch Horowitz, a distinguished historian of alternative spirituality is renowned for his erudite exploration of esoterica, mysticism, and the occult. Through his work, Horowitz not only delves into outsider history, emphasizing its relevance to contemporary life, but also advocates for the enduring pursuit of human empowerment. A PEN Award-winning author of many books and a prolific lecturer, he has many times answered the call to discuss the seeker's path on many platforms, from the most obscure, like kind of like this one, to the most mainstream. And to top it all off, maybe his crowning achievement, Mitch Horowitz is currently censored in China. There you go. So, oh yeah, I should probably add at this point, if you're listening to this episode on the day of the release, especially if it's still morning or if in the afternoon. So specifically, if you're listening to this on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024, a course. Mitch starts a course, I think it's a series of 6 courses called Icons of Modern Esoterica at the Theosophical Society, but you can subscribe online. So it starts tonight. So yeah, if you're listening to this before the course starts, you can probably, I guess, still enroll. So there you go. All right, some quick notes before I move on. Next week is going to be a solo show. I have a subject in mind. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the subject of the show. And if I stick with that one, it's going to be a pretty important one because it has to do, well, I mean, it's personally important, but also it has to do with the kind of the core of the show. And it's a subject that I think it's important not to belabor it too much, but it's important to at least put it out there at least once. Isn't that mysterious? I hope the subject really inspires me, because if I change last minute, this will all be for naught. All right. So there you go. After that, I'm taking a week off from the show to work on other things. But the interviews are coming back in March. I already have a bunch of guests booked, discussions that I can't wait to have and that I can't wait to share. So there you go. Again, I want to thank everyone who's been leaving comments and subscribing. You know, in YouTube and social media era terms, it's not a big number, but that there's anyone at all that that would feel like they want to follow this work, like, is amazing to me. So I can't thank you enough to subscribe and just interact with me and the show on all the platforms. So thank you. So there you go. As usual, if you like this show, you can subscribe to it if you're not already subscribed. Like the episode if you like it, dislike it if you don't. Leave comments, whether good or bad. Leave questions if you want. Also, there's a Patreon that you can, where you can support my work. And there you go. So I've talked enough. And now it's time for this very, very cool discussion with Mitch Horowitz. Enjoy! Okay, so hello, Mr. Horowitz.
Good to be here, man.
I'm super excited. I've been hoping to have this opportunity to speak with you. Actually, probably way before I started, I thinking about having a podcast because, as some, I guess, of my viewers might know, I used to work in a warehouse, and I had a very like repetitive job. And to me, you're one of the. I would listen to podcasts and presentations and all day long, like thousands of hours, basically. And to me, you've always been one of the most thought-provoking writer, lecturer. Yeah, and I mean it in a very deep way, as in I would consider what you're saying and really grasp it, and struggle with it. And sometimes I'm like, no, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. And sometimes, but I'm like, this guy's so bright. So he knows what he's saying. So I'm probably wrong. And just, so you've been one of the most influential people in my life in the last 2 years. And we've had many conversations before, even though you don't know it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, man. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Great. So, listen, I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with a link with the two last episodes. It was completely unscripted or unplanned. So the last episode was with Ronnie Pontiac, and the one before was with Jill Emery, who was a member of Hole and other rock and punk bands in the 90s and I guess in the 80s. So and Ronnie has been also playing in bands and part of the rock and punk scene also. So here you are with the punk tattoos. I mean, some of them.
Okay. Yeah.
So, to me, something that I really wanted to throw at you is, do you see any link between punk and mysticism? And maybe tell us a little about what your history with punk is, like, just in a nutshell. And
sure. Probably my history with punk began when, I don't know, I must have been, maybe I was 17 years old, maybe younger, maybe 15. And I think I was probably high and staring off into space and listening to a college radio station. And the Dead Kennedy song Holiday in Cambodia came on. And it was like nothing I had ever heard before, because it was radical and revolutionary, but without any tropes. And it was pushing the listener away from rote thought. And I was very, very aroused and moved by it. And it turned my head in a lot of ways. And at that time, I had a childhood history of interest in the occult and the esoteric, particularly in folklore, but all facets of occult and mystical thought, and extending into questions of anomalies, UFOs, and flying saucers. And I was interested in the books of Carlos Castaneda and so forth. And I think the DIY quality of punk and the refusal to fit into precise categories, what is supposed to be left-wing, what is supposed to be right-wing, which flavor of anarchism are you supposed to be into, or whatever it may be. All of that was upended and challenged by punk, at least at that time, certainly. And I hope so still today. It's very easy for us as seekers of any kind to slip into our own rote thought and orthodoxies. The first thing human beings do when they break away from an organization is build new walls in the form of rules and exclusivities and certainties, and do it this way, not that way, use this term, not that term, or what have you. And we immediately start replicating the very orthodoxies from which we flee. Punk, as I saw it, took a hammer to that, at least at that time and place. And I suppose that I hope that informs my search as well, my spiritual and ethical search as well, in which I abide no walls whatsoever. I have no right to include or exclude anybody from anything. My search is entirely my own, and it takes me where it goes. And I offer no apologies nor any insistencies in connection with it. And so I'm reminded of a statement by the philosopher Paul Feyerabend, and he said, "I'm an anarchist in my private thought. Publicly, I have no right to induce anybody to participate in anything or belong to anything, but in private thought," and he didn't use this term precisely, but in search, I'm an anarchist. And so that's how punk and my search marries, I think.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's been the same for me, and this notion of, you said it, DIY. It was kind of an overarching theme of my last discussion also. And it kind of came as a surprise. I didn't know we would be talking about that with this last guest, with Ronnie. But it's so prevalent, and I'm happy to meet like-minded people, because especially,
I mean, you've got a who's who, I think, of people who are true searchers, and that's what I really dig about what you're doing. It's early on in your development of the pod, but the thing that I really like is that there's no one coming on sort of giving a stump speech. This is what I say, what I'm into, and that's so routine across podcasts. There are good ones out there, and people have good ideas, and people say surprising things. But within the spiritual space, we face a special challenge, because everything, because it's belief-based, can become calcified really, really fast. And people become so comfortable in what they're about and conforming to what they said 1 year ago or 6 months ago or whatever. And it's boring. And I think your pod is really for seekers. So I appreciate that.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. I mean, I get this another stamp of approval. I love it. Yeah, well, because I did see you say hear you say, sorry, that essentially and I said mysticism, I kind of, when I asked you for the link between punk and mysticism, I wrote occultism, actually. So, well, I was going somewhere else with that. I'm still
There's so much overlap in these areas, I never get respect with the terms. Yeah.
Well, okay, because I'd like to know if you have a personal idea of a difference between occultism and mysticism.
I think that mysticism is probably a larger umbrella under which you find all kinds of spiritual expressions. By spiritual, I mean extra-physical. And it seems to me that the mystical is the idea of contacting some unseen principle of life without any mediator. So you don't need a congregation, a doctrine, the man in the robes, a particular liturgy, a list of do's and don'ts. Mysticism is really a direct surge. And one can find it within what we call the religions. One can find it within the occult. I suppose, in its highest iteration, mysticism is an effort at direct perception of an unseen principle.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. And I kind of take issue sometimes when people find it a little pompous to call oneself a mystic, because I think it's, and again, maybe it's my punk or grungy background that makes me think this, but just because you only know 3 chords on a guitar doesn't make you, you're not a musician, So,
Well,
but
I have that reaction when people use the term enlightened or enlightenment, which I think is a term that I listen. Use whatever term you wish, but
Mhm.
I personally, I avoid it. I stay away from it because it presupposes an arrival, and I think that can be a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's the first obstacle actually for people who want to reach any kind of
Yeah,
enlightenment
and it
to
even
even use
presupposes
the term.
that enlightenment exists. I'm not at all sure that such a
Yeah.
thing exists. Realization, enlightenment, awakening, all these terms. These are terms from translations of ancient literature that have passed through innumerable hands, permutations, and I just don't know that that language necessarily serves us today because it gives us the certainty of a destination, and I'm not altogether sure that those states even exist or are available to human beings beyond the momentary.
Hmm.
Uh, I urge people before judging that to just sit with it for a while because we are nerd with all these certainties via ancient literature, and we're absolutely certain that decisions made by and states described by somebody else must be real because they're so widely repeated and familiar to us. As I often say, familiarity is not truth. It doesn't matter how frequently um, we hear references to certain concepts that seem as unquestionable as water being wet. It doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter. The
Hmm.
search is radically individualized, profoundly um, dependent, I think, upon self-verification, not upon repeating something that I'm absolutely certain exists because it's in the Dhammapada and it's in the Gospels and it's in the Tao Te Ching. Therefore, it must be, well, says who? The
Hmm.
individual
Hmm.
has to discover um, those footsteps and pitfalls for him or herself.
Absolutely. Well, but that said, uh, I'm still curious if you feel you've ever had an experience that that could be clumsily called as form of awakening, or maybe just a very cathartic experience. It's kind of a question I was keeping more for the end, but
Oh no, that's okay. I mean, I don't collect experiences, and I'm not, one will not infrequently meet people who are eager to pinhole us at parties or events and describe their mystical experiences to us. And I always find it very tedious, as if I'm looking at somebody's vacation pictures on their phone or at a certain point. Are you there now? Is this accessible to you now? Does it matter what happened to you last
Mhm.
January? I think that we grow so convinced that because we have this realization or awareness or sensitivity that somehow resets the baseline of our existence, and it doesn't. In my experience, it's simply an experience. If listen, I could describe having visited um, Mayan ruins in Guatemala and having had extraordinary experiences, but they were fleeting and they were intermittent. And the way that I
Mhm.
talk to people in my life, my children, my partner, the question of how I relate to other people, they're not feeling that experience that I had 7 years ago in Guatemala. They don't care if
Yeah.
I'm being impatient or if I'm being an asshole, that I had a wonderful experience on, you know, in Mayan ruins, 8 years ago. I'm not there right now. Or if I had a wonderful experience meditating last night where I felt the morphing of reality and a kind of non-linearity. Well, is that helping if I'm paying a bill late and
Yeah.
my, whomever, my accountant needs to get paid and I'm fucking dragging my feet? Does it help him? I had a wonderful meditation experience last night. So I hesitate around those things. They're there, but they flee us. We flee them. They go away. The aperture
Mhm.
closes. That's all. And then we're back to life. So people, using these anonymous names on social media who tell you that the path is this way or that way. I mean, Are they helping their best friend move? Do they show up to on time if they're picking somebody up at the airport? I mean, this is the shit I want to know, because our lives are in relationship, and payment of debt is in relationship, not whether, wow, man, I really, went all the way down the rabbit hole when I took this drug, or sat for this meditation session, or visited this holy site, or suddenly so-and-so, it dawned on me. If I'm not in that right now, I question, frankly, the degree to which it really matters. Maybe it matters. It tells us there's a signpost there. And that matters. But otherwise, I don't think we should get too hot and heavy about it. Nice cat.
Yeah, well, for sure it was going to be taking his role as the co-host.
Yeah.
So for people who don't see him on audio, we have BB today.
Rest assured, there's a cat there, and he's very nice. Seems to be.
All right. Well, I completely agree with all that you said. As a person who I've had life transforming experiences, I feel like I've been through things that I don't talk too much about for the reasons you mentioned, not only because it's kind of boring for people to listen to them, but also because it doesn't make me any better. And I've learned that over the years, and I still have to pay the rent. So
exactly.
Yeah. So all good. I'm all good with that. But I was still curious, because I know even sometimes, there's a form of yoga that is more based on the intellect, and like kind of struggling with a concept and just pushing it intellectually just to its end. And you can sometimes, I feel that sometimes I've had pretty wild experiences doing that inadvertently. I wasn't trying to do anything specific. I'm just obsessed with some ideas sometimes. And
well, I think yoga of the intellect is very, very valid, and it's certainly been there for me. One of the reasons I write so extensively nowadays on ESP research, psychical research, is because to me, seen from a certain perspective, that is yoga of the intellect. That is pointing towards the extra-physical with replicable stats that have proven unpolluted, bulletproof. And it's wonderful to me, because these scientists are struggling with very little funding, with very little public approbation or applause, completely locked out of or smeared on Wikipedia by activists, activists in favor of a physicalist or materialist philosophical point of view, very fundamentally hostile to anything suggestive of non-local intelligence, no matter how remarkable in scope and scale and replicable in data. And it's extraordinary, because we have, even if J.B. Rhine's ESP card tests that he conducted at Duke University in the early 1930s, if the whole field of parapsychology had stopped dead in its tracks right there, something that much of the professional skeptics community would like, we would still have statistically meritorious, replicable, unpolluted data dictating that there exists a non-local extraphysical quality of the intellect, that we as men and women are able to receive and exchange information in a laboratory setting in some way that goes beyond the five senses or known technology. And that holds true today. So here we are almost a century later, and even those early experiments, which have struggled within the public realm, within reference media, within Wikipedia for acceptance, and that's an ongoing, maybe perpetual struggle. It certainly hasn't, the dial hasn't moved very much, but the data is there and it keeps accumulating and growing. It is solicited in various ways. And it tells us that extra physicality exists. That to me, although it's not an experience, is a yoga of the intellect. Then I have had experiences, some of which I've written about. Sometimes they've occurred over a relatively short interval period of time, more frequently for me over a longer interval of time. But I've had experiences of congruity between outer event and thought that have been beyond any actuarial table, beyond any law of large numbers, beyond anything that could be contained within the usual boxes that materialist philosophy insists define life. So it's thrilling when those things occur, because one does get a glimpse, almost like in Lawrence of Arabia when they glimpse the water. Well, they're not there yet, but they know the water's there, and it's remarkable.
Exactly, and I guess that's well, just what you described. I guess you were referring to the experiences you've had, like really mind blowing synchronicities, for example.
Yeah.
And that's something that often I remind myself of when I'm tempted to try to just take it easy and just go into a metaphysical tradition that will take me by the hand and whatever, because it doesn't feel to me the way that I'm built. It doesn't feel like it's a needed thing, because experiences such as crazy, those wild synchronicities, they will come. You don't have to meditate for hours on end, and and I've been thinking about, and I'd like to have your opinion on that. That maybe this expansion of our ESP abilities, if you want to call it that, which I feel are deeply spiritual and not just entertaining, do you feel you have just a natural propensity towards that? And it's kind of almost, I feel like we're witnessing kind of an additional sense that's just growing slowly within ourselves when we pay attention to these things. Is that an actual question?
Well, you made a very important point, which is that these synchronicities are going to arrive, whether a person is on a search or not, whether a person considers him or herself spiritual, religious or not. In fact, I would venture that some of the most memorable such stories I've ever heard come from people who were not part of any spiritual subculture, were not necessarily looking out for anything. If we live lives that are both material and extra-physical, which I ardently believe we do, and I consider that a very warranted belief, then it stands to reason that all of us, from time to time, are going to have these experiences. In fact, these things may even extend into the UFO thesis, something I've been writing more about. If we accept the premise emergent from some of the most compelling aspects of theoretical physics, Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, the many worlds theory, it's a logical necessity that there exists other dimensions or other intersections of time, and we may have experiences of these other dimensions or other intersections of time, and we refer to them by terms like poltergeist or UFO or anomaly or ESP or what have you. These are just place markers. These are metaphors for experiences that we don't fully understand, but they may be rife and they may be all around us. Now, apropos of your second point, William James made the observation that he saw no reason that belief in a certain principle, call it God or something else, wouldn't heighten the experience of that principle in one's existence, that the very belief itself in an actual concrete way, not just as some sort of cognitive prejudice, but in an actual way, could open the door, so to speak, to the influences of the thing believed in more and more in the individual's life, which I suppose is another of the reasons that I write so extensively these days on ESP research, because it could be that if we understand this aspect of psyche, then it becomes less complicated in terms of liturgy, ritual preparation to actually access and experience it. We come to know ourselves, perhaps in a less encumbered way.
Yeah. Well, and this aspect of knowing oneself on the spiritual path, if we want to call it that, not everyone experiences this as a path or anything is for me it's primordial. And I have many friends who are part of more established traditions, and for them it seems to contribute to their path or their evolution until it doesn't, so but we're all it's and it's contemplating astrology that made me realize how built on different frames and following different primordial principles we are, like that there can't be just one truth, and it's hard for me to just trust one model, because of that. And I will take the risk to include some of your work, Mitch. Because as I was saying in the beginning, I really struggled with some of the exercises that I've that proved to work for a lot of people, and I know that you've had a lot of, so I'm not questioning that. To me, like after a little while, I would lose interest. Like, for example, like 30-day miracle.
The 30-day mental challenge.
Yeah. I can't. I've tried many times in other ways too, but just the fact that I tried was extremely important to understand how I'm built and how I am able to manifest and be productive in life. So all this brings me to a question that I'm really curious to know your thoughts about, is how does one kind of structure their path or their search, because as I said, I have a lot of friends around me who are very stuck in their beliefs and their practices, but I also see a lot of people who just kind of float around and never truly confront themselves. So there's no there's no strength in what they're doing, and it's just basically just floating around. So how does one, you know what I mean?
It depends, of course, upon the state of the individual. If an individual finds him or herself in a state where what they're doing in commerce, what they're doing in their family life, how they relate to people, how they, what kind of self-image they operate from. If all that is going well, then I would say there's nothing else to be done. I don't think that anybody has to go on a search or, leave their home for all I care. It's more power to you. I might even fall at your feet and beg you to become my teacher. And then I suppose you could say the ideal of the Buddha was that there be no search, that there be no Buddhism, that there be no labels. And I honor that. I think that following affinity is important. At least it certainly has been for me. One of the affinities that I feel, the thing that drives me in the direction of a set of teachings or ideas, it very often starts with the purveyor of those ideas, the personality, the persona I perceive, at least historically, behind the ideas. So I got very interested, for example, years ago in the persona of G.I. Gurdjieff. I got interested in the persona of H.P. Blavatsky. I got interested in the persona of Neville Goddard. I grew interested in the persona of Anton LaVey. A whole range of people whose work I felt deserved a look or a second look or a third look because something about the persona of the purveyor appealed to me in some way. And I've always followed that. I don't feel that anybody needs to apply him or herself to anything outside of that sense of affinity in the search.
Mm-hmm.
The only proof being the experience of the seeker, the conduct of the seeker. I am much more interested in searching with, having an exchange with a person who is demonstrably effective in outer life, which is the proving ground for most of our existence. One could say it's just the tip of the glacier and the real thing is going on below the surface, and that's okay. But the truth is, we have to pay debts, conduct commerce, maintain homes, care for other beings, be cared for to some extent by other beings, keep or break our word, repay or welch on our debts, show up or not show up, do a good job or do a just good enough job. And those are the areas in which our daily existence is measured and is counted off until the period of physical decline that precedes death. Yeah. The extra-physical is part of that too, but I believe it's very important that one be impeccable to the degree possible in those areas of life that we commonly share. In the absence of that impeccability, I'm just not interested, frankly. I don't want to hear about reincarnation from somebody who can't water a houseplant. I don't want to hear about meditation or prayer or extraordinary synchronicities from someone who can't show up to do a job that he or she is committed to doing, or whatever it may be. So I place a lot of stock in that. I often find it much more interesting to talk to people from worlds of finance or media or something like that than I do worlds of spirituality, because I think some people flee the demands of outer life by claiming themselves spiritual, and therefore they don't have to perform at these tasks that they might find very difficult. And search can never be exactly found in running from what is difficult to perform, unless, well, look, I'm happy to be challenged on that. You know, if somebody doesn't want to conform to outer life, that's fine with me. But they're going to have to demonstrate in their conduct and experience something valuable, and not just somebody, again, who wants to pinhole you at a party or a spiritual center and talk about something, but doesn't know how to unstuff a toilet, you know. And so I'm not pushing anybody to be on the search, but I do feel, speaking for myself, that one of the ineffable qualities of the search is I don't want to tell other people what to do. And I expect the same in reciprocity. And that quality that we all harbor of wanting to tell another person how to approach the most intimate experiences of his or her life, or what to read, or what to eat, or what door to open, or whatever it may be. Authentic search, ethically, therapeutically, spiritually, whatever it may be. I suspect that urgency to tell other people what to do, to correct other people, recedes.
Yep. I love it. Actually, my second interview was with Ian Duncan, who's a Taoist priest, and I guess he would call himself a spiritual teacher. And I did ask him, what does that mean? What's exactly the role of a spiritual teacher? And I love his answer. Basically, he gave me a pretty long answer, and at the end, he said, basically, it's just asking, "Are you sure?"
That's terrific. Are you sure?
Yeah. Because this search is pretty lonesome in many ways. That's why I think the DIY aspect of it is so important. And on that subject, because I've been also kind of almost obsessively asking around um, about how do I frame this? Um, the presence of gods. I've heard you sometimes refer to deities that were at least inspiring or maybe nourishing for you in your life. And man, the answers I've got were pretty wild because like it gets into will and then free will, and do the gods have will, and do you have free will? And it gets pretty convoluted. But still, I'm always curious to know how seekers such as you experience something that they call an entity or a god. I have my own experiences of that. It's hard for me to put them in a category of a being with a free will, just like me or you, because they don't seem to change their minds very much, as opposed to human beings. So do they fit more in the category of an archetype or a primordial energy? Or so any thoughts on that? Because
it's such a personal question. I'm very unsettled on questions like monotheism or whether everything converges on one point. I suppose we in the West, and maybe in other parts of the world as well, are encouraged to think in terms of this universal oneness. And I suppose arguably we see this in nature. The sun emits rays, emits heat. Where is all this coming from? Where are these photons coming from? Well, it all converges to this one place, which then is a dot compared to someplace else. And our perception, which feels overwhelmingly persuasive, is that everything that is a thing converges somewhere. I don't know if that's true. I have absolutely no way of verifying that. Mm-hmm. I know that our ancient ancestors, even going back to pre-human existence, Neanderthal existence, existence in a simian versus a Homo sapien form, presuming these are our earliest human ancestors. We know that Neanderthal men and women had a spiritual existence. They used totems to assist in the hunt, like an eagle claw or a bear claw. We know that Neanderthal man possessed figurines, which in the 19th century were deemed Venus figurines, obviously a contemporary term for them, that were to abet fertility. So it would almost be like a feminine figure, kind of plump, with breasts and a humanoid form that was intended to communicate fertility. And so we know that we as a human species, and even our ancestors in the form of Neanderthal men and women for hundreds of thousands of years, were possessed of a spirituality that was not necessarily monotheistic. Different entities and objects were associated with worship, from the moon to different animals to the human form itself. And monotheism for us in the West, those of us who have grown up within the shadow of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, it feels so absolute and so certain. One might feel that way even within the Vedic cultures. But I don't think that there's any imperative other than thought parameters that, again, may be so overwhelmingly familiar they feel as present as drawing breath. But I don't know that should dictate or control our search. It seems to me that one of the aspects of Christianity and of Islam that have heavily colored our world in the West is the imperative to propagate. And that imperative to propagate is very, very deeply felt within the Western mindset. This, again, I'm speaking from familiarity. I'm not suggesting this is absent in other cultures or parts of the world as well. Mm-hmm. But we in the West, particularly those of us raised in the shadow of the Abrahamic traditions, particularly with respect to Christianity and Islam, are induced to propagate. And that colors our intellect so heavily, and it can be very, very limiting. Why should there be this need to propagate? It's just a kind of corporate thinking, and obviously it could be justified theologically. If you really believe that, look, Muhammad is bringing a good life to us. Jesus is bringing a good life to us. Let's spread the good news. Let's go to the highways and hedges and bring them in. And if they don't cooperate, maybe they will at the point of a sword. And that's the human story here in the West, along with much else, of course. And I really want to examine that. I really want to take that apart. I really want to get away from that, personally speaking. Mm-hmm. If I feel like propagating, I will. If I don't feel like propagating, I won't. And I don't want to be propagated too, unless somebody's got something damn useful that they want to share with me. You want to share the Buddhist chant, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo? Good. Nichiren Buddhists do propagate, and I want to learn from them, and I want to learn about that chant. And if I want more, I will come to you. Don't come to me. Leave me alone, And that capacity to leave one another alone is so underappreciated, including this necessity that people feel to make sarcastic remarks or to tell people what to do over social media, which is where we spend a huge amount of our lives. Just try leaving people the hell alone for an hour. See how it goes. I offer that to people.
Clearly. I love how you deconstruct things, and then you're the fact that you, as I said, you're thought-provoking because you're provoking those heavily settled ideas. And it personally, I think that's the biggest impact you've had on me, you and your work, is twofold. Firstly, reconsidering how maybe New Age thinking and of my past has contributed positively in my life, because I tend to kind of refrain from that now, because because I ended up realizing that I still have to pay the rent, So it was like, all that crap, that manifestation shit, that I don't want any of that, and people who believe that are dumb. Well, not necessarily, And the second way you've helped me so much with your work is because at the same time that I discovered New Age culture with my basically through my mom when I was, 14 maybe, I also got a hold of a Zen book. It was a book of Zen stories that I still have to this day, and that and Zen koans and just little Zen stories basically. So a part of me went into the Eastern, I don't want to say it in a way that's too broad or too too vulgar, but the non-dualism of Eastern thought, Yep. Mm-hmm. And I understood how maybe I'm not built for that, to be able to pay the rent as a non-dualist,
Yeah. It's like, we still have to pay attention to linearity. I have to show up to talk to you at 1 p.m. Eastern. If not, yeah.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, there's still experiences I've had because of that I can't just put aside. I've had them, and so I know there's in a way, non-dualism is very logical if you push it to if you push thought to its extremes. You know, when words reach their limit, you know, and
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how you experience that, because you're someone who's so good with words, and I appreciate your interest also to kind of to pull those some words apart and just rebuild them in a way that you feel more either productive or more concrete or more actualizable. Is that a word?
No, I dig it. I began to realize how within our most commonly used terms across different languages are walls, are gates. We have to generalize or we won't be able to communicate. So time to time, I'll remind people and remind myself, I'm not going to get hung up with including or excluding this term or that term. And I'm not going to constantly put asterisks next to everything so as to question the experience, because to some degree, we all generalize, and we have to generalize, or we just couldn't make plans and get through the day and so forth. But I didn't come to realize the extent to which we are walled in by concepts which fall under the rubric of words. So non-attachment, inner, essence, non-identified, all those things are supposed to be good, and their opposites bad in the spiritual search. And it dawned on me at a certain point, I don't know any of that to be correct. Someone chastised me for being outer looking, too concerned with outer material life. And I thought to myself, well, in the spiritual culture, nobody wants to be called that, because the suggestion is that you're kind of backward, you're looking in the wrong place, you're misdirected, you went down the wrong road. Yeah, I get it. But I'm experiencing authentic and retentive joy sometimes when I'm doing things that are so-called outer, like having this conversation right now. And to turn away from that, it would seem to me, would be the equivalent of playing a cruel joke on myself. It would be refusing evidence in favor of what's supposed to be. This is a joke I was telling somebody the other day. You might know that in Persian tradition, there's this figure, Mullah Nasruddin, and the mullah is kind of an idiot genius. He's always getting into trouble, and yet its troubles are almost acts of theater that point up how absurd we are as human beings. And there's a famous story about the mullah. I mean, there's thousands of them in Persian tradition. There's a famous story about the mullah, and one night he loses his keys outside his house, and a neighbor comes to check up on him, and he finds that the mullah is searching for his keys inside the house. And he said, "Mullah, you lost your keys outside the house. Why are you searching inside?" And the mullah says, "There's better light in here." And that's the way that, we get misdirected on the church. Oh, but this is where I'm supposed to be, right? This is where the light is. I have to be searching in here, and it could be such a cruel absurdity that we play on ourselves. Why should the search be definable by all these terms that may in fact be tearing the seeker in two, but he or she keeps at it because, well, there's better light in here. And, but it's ridiculous because obviously the keys are outside. So the notion that, I should try hard to be more inner focused, or try this, or try that, or observe myself when I'm experiencing joy. Maybe I'll see that those are hopeless little soap bubbles that go pop and I'm nothing but a hungry ghost. These are all conceptual terms. These are all decisions that were made by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are verified by me. And I began to realize that the sense of relaxation in the profoundest sense that I was experiencing when I'm doing the things that I feel the deepest affinity for, that I feel most unified by, whether it's writing or speaking or and all kinds of things. Why should I be separating that from my search? How do I know that the world that we can see and the world that we can't see are, in fact, different worlds, ordered differently, that one's better than the other, and I should be seeking to drink from one well or not the other? Maybe it's the same well. I started to wonder about that. So that's animated many of my questions recently.
Mm-hmm. I have to admit that at one point, I was one of those. Of course, I wasn't very aggressive about it, but I was wondering, like, is that guy like a materialist? Like, and like it doesn't make sense because. Yeah, exactly. It's just trying to steer us in the wrong direction. No, I'm kidding. I wasn't thinking that, but because as I said in the beginning, when I read your books or listen to you speak, I always have in the back of my mind, like, this guy is smart. Don't forget. So there might be something you're missing. Or there might be something that just it doesn't resonate and with my experience of life. And this is such.
That, and I encounter figures like that. I might encounter somebody who has conclusions that I'm very uncomfortable with, but I feel that there's something compelling about his or her character, either living or historically, more often historically. Yeah. And I won't give up on that person because I think, again, it's the person, him or herself, that I evaluate first. I mean, what else is there?
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't give up easily, sometimes you're very surprised. And one of those surprises came when I was I was preparing for this interview. Because believe it or not, people, I do prepare, even though sometimes I'm a bit messy.
It showed. So important.
All right. So, because I've heard you in an interview talk about how you came with the 10-day mental challenge.
Yeah.
How you came up with that exercise for you, because you didn't feel like, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but how some other things didn't resonate for you, and then for to create and to work on this 10-day mental challenge was a search on how you are functioning and to experience. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, if in anything that I'm saying. So to create an experience that would resonate with your way of manifesting. And so I noticed right there, like, that's the thing, like, it was like, okay, I get how, although like it seems to some seekers like the material and the manifesting aspect might seem a bit superfluous and superficial.
Yeah,
I realized how deeply you thought about these things, and how seriously you considered it.
I appreciate that, and I really want to thank you for that, because I feel very seen by that remark. I think one of the most painful things that a person experiences is the incapacity of somebody else to recognize the dedication, the seriousness, the ingenuousness with which they are approaching a certain question. And immediately within our culture, we have people who dismiss whole swaths of ideas because, I don't believe in this economic idea. I don't believe in this spiritual idea. That idea is for dummies. And I get it. I'm not oblivious to any of this. But in terms of, say, manifestation, or selection is the term that I use, again, the degree to which somebody is truly putting sweat equity and effort into that question is everything. because all of us can just take a term off a shelf and say, I'm this, I'm that. And the association itself is sufficient to bespeak seriousness, and they never have to qualify for or apologize for anything again. And one of the things I learned in my outer career, I suppose you could say, one of the things I learned in my work in publishing, for example, and that I try to bring into every area of life is you don't seek out depth or quality based on subject. You seek it out based on querent. Who is behind it? Who is doing the work? So I'm vastly more interested in the individual behind the search than I am in what school of thought he or she is pursuing, or for that matter, writing on. I've read infinitely more intelligent books on maybe a topic that seems overly familiar to us, like tarot, for example, certain works to which people have dedicated dissertations coming out of really highly regarded divinity schools at Harvard or Chicago or something. Sort of down and dirty example, and I want to speak very broadly about this, but Henry Wallace, for example, who was Franklin Roosevelt's second vice president, big occult seeker, dedicated theosophist, interested in astrology, interested in Native American shamanism, Tibetan Buddhism, somebody who was considered, say, in the 1930s and 40s, a real weirdo within North American culture. North Americans weren't heavily invested in Native American shamanism and Tibetan Buddhism and, theosophy at that time. And he took a lot of shit. It ruined his political career. And I love this man because he had difficulty understanding, as I have difficulty understanding, the inability of people to see the seriousness of his search. And I love him for that. I love him for that because we tend to project ourselves everywhere. So a cynic sees cynics everywhere. An idealist sees idealists everywhere. And Wallace was possessed of the belief, not because he was foolish, but because he was a real seeker and a real idealist. He was possessed of the belief that surely the Washington Press Corps, if he sat down and just explained it to them, would grasp the seriousness of his search, even if they didn't share it. And I encounter people all the time, you encounter people all the time, who say, oh, you're into this or you're into that. That's bullshit. That's training wheels. Well, that's ridiculous. Based on what evidence? That's just arguing taste, like which is better, chocolate or vanilla. And preposterous, it's just arguing taste. The proving ground is in the conduct and the experience of the individual, which is why again and again, I'm emphasizing relationships, conduct, ethics. Don't ask me if I've gotten anywhere. Ask my 17-year-old son in the next room, ask my partner who's downstairs, ask them. Am I standing up and keeping my word, on Friday afternoon, not in some dramatic, ethereal way, and look into my life and see what I do and how I live to the greatest extent you're possible, but that's possible. But look in the mirrors of relationship and be fucking brutal with yourself about it. Start there, So I appreciate what you're saying because people are incapable of thinking outside of categories, especially categories that are popular. And I gravitate towards categories that are popular, whether it's New Thought or Transcendental Meditation or what have you. The ability to reach people with a metaphysical idea or technique when life is so profoundly busy and something can break through. I'm intrigued by that, and I want to look at those things. I want to examine those things. I'm also interested in things that are wildly unpopular that I might find a certain persona, expression, statement within that I'm very aroused by, and I adopt the freedom unilaterally to gravitate towards that, and I'll share what I found because I'm a seeker, and that's it.
Great. I want to be mindful of your time, so maybe 1 or 2 questions more if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead. Be free. I'm enjoying our talk.
All right. Cool. Well, all of what you just said, actually reminded me of someone. I will be very impressed if you know this person, because she is somewhat known, but I'll explain. So when I was from a period in a period between 17 and maybe 22, 23 years old, I went to a place in the eastern townships here in Quebec, called, I don't even know if they had an English name, but Institut du Développement de la Personne. So like the Institute for Personal Development or something. And the woman who was directing and created that place was someone called Annie Marquier. She's written a bunch of books, all on I don't even know how to call it. One of them was called the pouvoir de choisir, the power to choose. Another one was la liberté, the free. That's probably not the exact translation, but the freedom to be, or something like that. And that book actually was in Oprah's book club once. So she was kind of well known in a way, you know, although she was French and she was working in French mainly, I guess. Still, my point, where I'm going with that is, because it was a place where there was like they created workshops that would last like a whole weekend, and they have different themes and all of that. And at the time, I didn't know that it felt a bit new agey, and like it had a kind of a cultish feel to it. Although I knew that the person leading this place like was really trying to avoid that as much as possible. So it's just after years of life experience and after leaving that place that I realized how deep this person's work was. She was inspired by a lot, I think, by I'm drawing a blank here. Not Annie Besant. She channeled. You know her for sure.
You mean
Alice Bailey? Alice Bailey.
Alice
Yeah,
Bailey,
that's it. Yeah. So, Rudolf Steiner, but she never talked about these people. You know.
Well, I'm very interested to read this woman. I don't know her work. I like discovering. I like things that are very simple. I like things that are very simple, because our lives are so complex and our needs are so great that, to me, simplicity can be a very clarifying blade that cuts through things, and it's good if it works. I'm interested in a mystical figure named Vernon Howard, who died here in the United States in 1992. I never met the man, but I love his work. He confuses people because he gave his books very lurid titles, very sensationalistic titles, like The Mystic Path to Cosmic Power. Oh boy, you know. If he was still living, I would ask him why he gave his book such lurid titles. I assume he felt that it would reach the broadest possible number of people, and he really truly didn't give a shit whether anybody liked them or not. And I love that about the man. You know, he would write a book called Esoteric Mind Power, and somebody thought, oh, that sounds so silly. And his attitude, I remember he told a room full of students once, we're here every Thursday night. Everybody's welcome. You don't like what you hear, don't come back. And I like that quality. Anyway, his stuff was very, very, very simple. He would tell students, write down the phrase false feeling of life on a little piece of paper. Now, live with that for 6 months, and that's it. You know, that's today's lesson. And I think he promulgated so much that was, for me personally, truthful. He also promulgated things that I couldn't make peace with. So I'm always in a wrestling match with Vernon, but I love him. And the simplicity of his work is astonishing. So much so that for many people of a more scholastic bent, they're incapable of approaching it. It's embarrassing to them, just like it's embarrassing to be seen reading Think and Grow Rich on the New York City subways or what have you, cover it up with something else, And I read Foucault, I don't read this crap, and of course, that book, within the folds and contradictions of the life of its author, appear extraordinary, wonderful ideas, which is what creates such dedication to the book, something that the snobs will never understand. And the inability to enter a work because we don't like its form, its wrapping, it's too simple, that's baby stuff, that's training wheels, that's Mickey Mouse stuff, I need the real thing, it's crap, because it deters experience. It deters experience, and we turn the search into almost an exercise in prejudice. And if again, the proof of the pudding is in the hourly existence of a person's life, and usually, and this is something I learned from Vernon Howard, the first marker is the capacity to leave other people alone. Without that capacity to leave other people alone, I'm not sure that a person can really be on a search, because again, there's a tendency to want to protect what one claims for oneself. And if I'm claiming the right to be left alone and I don't extend that to you or to your listeners, what does that make me? It's kind of the worst kind of hypocrite, and I should be called out as such. So I think stuff starts to happen when we feel less urgent about shoving other people around, including through dumbass remarks and things that actually deteriorate our sense of self-respect. Insult or piss on another person or disrupt another person's life, we feel a sense of sublimated shame that I think we paper over by just going back to the bottle, taking another swig. Kind of, the very model of addiction. I'm unhappy, and then I take refuge in the thing that's killing me. But we do that on social media and in daily life, all the while not realizing the sense of degradation that it visits on us, which is the compulsion to keep doing it over and over because it's the one relieving thing. I believe that's part of what Vernon was driving at when he referenced a false feeling of life.
By the way, just so people know, I've there's a struggle that you've talked about in a presentation from many years ago about the thought of it feels like you had a kind of a little boxing match between Vernon Howard and
Neville Goddard.
And Neville Goddard about the, and I don't want to get into that because it could be a long thing, but just this notion of my will be done against thy will be done.
Yes.
This is something I really encourage people diving into for themselves. I've done due diligence. In fact, it's actually because I self-published a book last June, and actually you are mentioned in there in that struggle and my own struggle with those ideas also in a chapter also dedicated to this. So I will link in the show notes a presentation that you've done about this. I think to me, it was life-changing to consider those questions very seriously.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think that was in a lecture possibly titled The Miracle Club that I delivered at the Philosophical Research Society, which is on their channel on YouTube, I think.
I have it somewhere, so yeah, sure. All right. One last question. Are you good?
Sure.
I want to make it not too heavy, just to end with, because it's something I've and it's completely. It feels like a bit of a left field thing because it's just a subject that I haven't heard you talk about a lot, and I'm kind of curious as to maybe why, or because a lot of people nowadays are thinking about and talking about technology and the advent of AI, large language models, and all that stuff. And to me, like when I look in the future and kind of try to make sense of what all that could mean, I'm like, yo, we're we're gonna go through like some kind of forced I'm gonna use the word awakening in a way, or forced destruction. I don't know exactly how it's gonna go. Maybe sometimes those two concepts they go very well together, destruction and awakening. Anyways, so how come maybe I just missed it? Like, how do you see that in the future? Like how can I even put this? Okay. How does the future with AI look for the seeker?
Weird.
Is that a too long of a question?
No, not at all. A lot of people have noted that I don't say too much about spirituality and technology, and they wonder about how the digital era has altered, has changed the spiritual search. And of course, one can venture all kinds of metaphors between extra physical and digital experience. There's a tantalizing, maybe one could find tantalizing intersections between the two. My perspective is that human nature is constant, and that the tools through which human nature travels in its forms of expression tend to heighten or disinhibit certain aspects of it. So, for example, on social media, the anonymity, the 24/7 availability, the satisfaction to give us attention, either positive or negative, heightens aspects of human nature that we might wish were not heightened. Everyone is aware of the piss-poor quality of human dialogue over social media, for example, the rhetorical questions, the lowbrow sarcasm, the cruelty, the insults, the anonymity, which is really a form of cowardice in many cases, not all. It seems to me that all social media has done is serve to disinhibit certain traits of human nature. It's helped and hurt with commerce. I'm glad I was able to sell books during the pandemic lockdown. So I recognize fully that there's other sides to that. Every stick has two ends, as Gurdjieff said, and we're going to see those experiences, it seems to me, those consequences accelerate. I fathom that within 5 years or so, AI is going to be responsible for a great portion of the narration that we hear, the voiceover that we hear, the narration over audiobooks, and is going to find its way into all kinds of working professions. And we are going to be, we as a human community are going to be faced with very, very heavy questions about what the hell to do and how to structure our economy. And we're going to need a different tax code because we're going to have different modes of work. And a lot of people may find themselves without work that they were once able to rely upon because of the advent of AI. I can't fathom that there's any thinking person who doesn't care a hell of a lot about that. How or whether it's changed our search, it's an open question for me. Certainly, again, human nature is so constant. Our problems are so constant. I mean, wow, you'll still find human archetypes in all the ancient myths. It's not like we don't recognize the characters from Homer or Shakespeare, or we don't recognize the wisdom intrinsic in The Art of War, impulsivity, anger is a human problem. We recognize things, and so human nature is consistent, but the onrush of information and the availability of a 24/7 microphone heightens aspects of human nature. And I'm interested, I have to say, I'm interested in the question of accelerants on the path, whether certain things can serve as accelerants. I remember, apropos of not allowing somebody's experience to usurp our own, many years ago, I was in an esoteric group and I asked a certain question, and an elder member of the group said, there are no shortcuts. And I got to thinking, how do I know there are no shortcuts? I hear that so often, and it sounds so admittedly commonsensical that one just immediately wants to embrace it. But I don't know that that's true. Maybe TM is a shortcut. Maybe the mantra of Emile Coué is a shortcut. Maybe chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is a shortcut. You know, how's the individual know? Maybe the books of Vernon Howard or the Power to Choose that you were referencing are a shortcut. I don't know that. I don't know that. And I would encourage the individual not to accept something just because it's so overwhelmingly familiar or commonsensical sounding. I don't even believe there is such a thing as common sense, or the world would be much better off if it's common sense to look where you're going when you're fucking passing through a stop sign. It seems to me we're in short supply. I like to speak in terms of good sense, but I don't know, with apologies to Thomas Paine, that there's such a thing as common sense. And yet these things have a pull on us. And I guess all I'm really trying to say is that if the pressures of daily life become more intense or come at us more quickly due to tech, I don't know, we may require accelerants on the path, in fact. And I don't know if those things are real. I don't know if things are possible, and neither does anybody else. The individual simply has to experiment or reject that experiment. It's up to the individual. But I care very deeply about the question of accelerants, and that's probably something I'm going to be focusing more on over the next year or so.
Love to hear that. Yeah, well, when I think about all of that, I have to say, and that's not to disparage any suffering that people might experience in chaotic times, but I do look at all that, and maybe it's my rising Scorpio aspect that makes me very comfortable in chaos, and I strive in chaos, and I kind of love it in a way. So, but I'm like, I think of the future, and I have this tricksterish smile that comes on. I'm like, oh, that's gonna be cool.
We're gonna have a front row seat, So I just this year here in the United States, it's gonna be one hell of a year,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Listen, man, I was a bit nervous at the beginning. We had some little technical issues, but I'm happy of how this discussion turned out. It was really great speaking with you, man.
Pleasure. A pleasure. Absolutely. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope we have other occasions such as this.
Definitely.
So if I want to be a good podcaster, I guess I have to finish with Mitch. Where can people find you? And actually, I should ask. Well, I do know the answer, but what are you working on right now?
Well, my most recent book is Modern Occultism, which I'm very proud of, and I have a new book coming out in the month of March called Happy Warriors, which tells the story of the lives and search of some of the key thinkers in the positive mind tradition, touching on some of what we've talked about. So in that book, Happy Warriors, you find profiles of Neville Goddard, Vernon Howard, Florence Scovel Shinn, Napoleon Hill, and I hope that seekers will find a lot of nourishment in this book, because I pay as much attention to the failures as the successes, the shortcomings, and as much as the splendors. We have to see these people not as monochromatic, but as whole men and women. Some of them had real problems in their lives, and some of them produced extraordinary work. Some of them produced questionable work. Some of them did things that I find very frustrating and objectionable. Some of them did things that have been very moving to me. but we can't see these people as stick figures. And that goes for those of us who are favorable and disfavorable towards them. So I try to use Happy Warriors to really delve into their lives and get into the guts of what they were about and what they produced, its failures, its successes, and where it leaves us as seekers today and what might require building upon. So I'm excited about that book.
Yeah. I love that title. I love that title, man.
It's from a poem from William Wordsworth called the Character of the Happy Warrior.
Great. Love it. All right. So I guess MitchHorowitz.com. It's all there. You're on Twitter also.
All there. MitchHorowitz.com. And let's see. If you go to MitchHorowitz.com, you'll find a bunch of links. I'm on Twitter at Mitch Horowitz, on Instagram at Mitch Horowitz 23. And there's plenty of ways to find me. I got a class coming up in 1 week called Icons of Modern Esoterica that I'm putting up with the Theosophical Society. There's a lecture that they just put up on their website right now called Occultism as Philosophy, which is sort of an introductory lecture to the class. It's free, obviously. It's on YouTube on Theosophical Society's webpage.
Yep. And by the way, I will link to that also because in the show notes, because I was present for that talk and it was so great. So, all right, I'm going to let you go. Well, actually, if you don't mind staying real quick after we stop recording.
Right. We'll jump.
So, all right. Thanks again, Mitch.
Thank you.
So you've made it to the end of this Hopscotch Chronicles podcast episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And I thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you're benefiting in a way or another from this conversation. So if you'd like to follow my work, whether on this podcast or my personal work, you can go to Twitter or X and follow me at Domi_Valet, DOMI_Valet. Same username for Instagram if you prefer that platform. You can also go to the official website for the podcast, which is hopscotchchronicles.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast as well as my personal work, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon. The address is patreon.com/Dominic Valle, DOMINIC Valle, VALLEE. There you'll find video and audio versions of the episodes without any commercials, as well as special episodes on every Sunday where I take my Sunday afternoon tea with you guys. All right, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep reaching for the light.